Greetings. My name is Ann Phillips, and I am the Director of Grant Making at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. We welcome you to this recorded version of the Grantseeker information sessions that we hosted in 8 locations around the state in September and October of 2017. As this is a recorded session, we're unable to take questions, but at the end of the presentation, I'll provide you with information on how you can get your questions answered. So let's briefly review what we'll cover in this session. This presentation is about 30 minutes long. First, we'll do an overview of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, including how our foundation is structured and how we do our grant making. Next, I'd like to share with you some information about significant improvements to our online grants application platform, GrantSource. Then we'll talk about the relaunching of a long-standing foundation program, our nonprofit loan program. Finally, we're making some changes and enhancements to our community grants program that we're really excited to share with you, and so we'll close with that. So let's begin with an overview of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and our grant making. The Charitable Foundation is a community foundation, and a community foundation is structured differently than private or other public foundations that you may be aware of, like, for example, locally the Endowment for Health, or some of the larger national foundations you may have heard of, like the Ford Foundation. Community foundations can be complex organizations, and it's important to understand this structure so you can understand how we work. Many of you are familiar with at least some aspects of the Charitable Foundation, but you may not know all of the facets of what we do. Unlike a private foundation whose funds come generally from one individual or family or company, the assets that make up a community foundation come from many different donors. Each of these donors brings their philanthropic capital to the community foundation and establishes a fund there. As you can see on this slide, we have over 1,800 funds at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, totaling just under $666 million in assets. Each of these funds was established by a donor who cares deeply about New Hampshire and its residents. But that's where the similarity ends, as each one of these funds is established with a specific purpose specified by the donor who established it. The foundation board and staff is charged with stewarding these funds, sometimes in close collaboration with the donor, but always consistent with each donor's individual intent, as well as the larger goal of ensuring that New Hampshire will always have a flexible and reliable source of philanthropic capital. One of the best ways to understand this is illustrated by this graphic of how the financial assets of the Charitable Foundation are broken down according to what type of fund each donor has established. So let's walk through this pie chart together. So first, around 9 o'clock on the pie chart, we have the agency and designated funds. A designated fund is established by a donor to support a specific named nonprofit. Agency funds are similar, but they are created by the nonprofit themselves to support their work. Field of interest funds, which are pictured here down around 6 o'clock, are funds targeting a specific area. Now, that might be a very specific issue area, say, for example, environmental protection, or a specific geographic area, say, for example, to support nonprofits in the Upper Valley, or even a combination of those things, for example, to support environmental protection in the Upper Valley. Up at around 11 o'clock on this pie chart are the unrestricted funds. These are our most flexible funds entrusted to us to support any broad charitable purpose. But as you can see, they make up only about 6% of our total funds. Our scholarship funds, pictured here at about 7 o'clock, are established to support individuals attending a 2 or 4 year higher education course of study, or for other types of post-secondary education, say licensing or credentialing programs. And finally, let's look at the biggest piece of this pie, and that is our donor-advised funds, taking up from 12 o'clock to almost 5 o'clock on this graph. Donor-advised funds are just that. While the donors have gifted the asset to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, they remain involved in the grant making from this fund, recommending the grants that we make from the fund. The reason it's important to understand these fund types is because the fund types and how much money is available in each of these different types of funds is very much tied to how the foundation grant dollars go out the door each year. So let's take a look at what that was like for 2016. In 2016, the foundation made more than 3,900 grant awards and 1,600 scholarship awards totaling about $38 million. As you can see in this chart, the percentages are in many ways aligned with the previous chart showing the types of funds. About $17 million, or 45% of our grant making, was granted through our generous community of donors, each of whom we work with in different ways. Some of these donors know exactly where they want to give, and they simply recommend grants to the organizations closest to their hearts. Other donors have chosen to create funds at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation to work with us in a deeper way, and they look to foundation staff to help them identify projects that align with their values and interests. The Community Grants Program, pictured here at about 330 on the pie chart, is our most visible and well-known grants program because applications are open to all qualified nonprofits around the state working in any issue area. Note, however, that this program makes up only about 6% of our total grant making. We also make grants through a small number of other programs. These programs are represented in the Other Application Grants slice of the chart from about 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock here. And the programs, these programs that are linked to funding sources for a particular purpose or geographic area. So this would include programs like the Wellborn Ecology Fund or the Tillotson Program for Coos County and surrounding regions, and the New Hampshire Youth SBIRD Initiative. Some of the grant making within this slice is aligned with particular initiatives, places where the foundation board and staff have decided to go deeper to contribute to solving big challenges facing our state, for example, through our New Hampshire Tomorrow initiative. The grant making to support our initiatives is done by invitation only. Again, on the pie chart, these grants can be found in that Other Applications slice of the pie. It's also important to point out that the foundation makes over $5 million in grants each year in scholarships to students of all ages for post-secondary education, to attend 2- or 4-year colleges, or for other credentialing and licensing programs. So that's an overview of our foundation structure. Now let's move on to the next section of our presentation, which is talking a little bit about our online application portal, Grantsource. So we're really excited to share that the foundation has invested in a new online grants application system. If you've applied with us before, it's still called Grantsource, but we believe it has lots of great new features that will make both your work and ours easier and more streamlined. Some of you have already started using the new Grantsource as we launched it in June. So if you've applied to the Wellborn program or the Tillotson or Community Grants program since June, then you've used the new Grantsource. You can access Grantsource by clicking on the Login button in the upper right-hand corner of our website, or at the web address that you see at the bottom of this slide, nhcf.smartsimple.com. Note that there's no www in this web address. When you do either of those two things, you'll be brought to this landing page where you can log in or register as a new user. For this presentation, rather than going to the live Grantsource site, we have a series of screenshots illustrating its functions. So let's walk through those now. So the page that you're looking at right now is the applicant dashboard. Everything you can see on this dashboard represents a real upgrade from the old Grantsource. Right here on one screen, you can access all the information you need about our application programs, your applications, your awarded grants, and grant reports. On the upper right-hand side, you see the Funding Opportunities section of the dashboard. Here's where you'll see any open grant programs listed. We didn't have any open programs when this screenshot was taken, so that's why it's blank. When a grant program is open and it's listed here, if you see a Details button to the right, that means you can click on that button to learn about the program, but you cannot apply as your organization profile needs to be updated. Click on the organization profile link at the top right to update your profile. Then when you come back to the dashboard, you will now see an Apply Now button, but you'll only get that Apply Now button if your profile's up to date. Click on the Apply Now button to begin that program's application process. On the upper left, you see the Application and Grants screen. In this particular shot, we're looking specifically at the My Applications tab. Listed here under the My Applications tab are the applications that you have submitted that are currently under review. Once you have submitted an application, you can open it and print it, but you will be unable to edit it. Okay, so we are still on the application and grants part of the dashboard on the left-hand side of the screen, but now we're looking at the Active Grants tab. Here you'll see listed all the active grants that you have received, any grants that you have been awarded through this new GrantSource system. And here's one of the really great new features of GrantSource. Note that just below in the My Reports section, you can see where you will access the report you will submit when you have completed the grant term. As you can see in this example, the system has already generated a report form for the Wellborn Ecology Fund grant up above in the Application and Grant section. You can see that it's the same because the submission ID numbers above and below are the same. Now here's a caveat. If you applied and received a grant prior to June 2017, your reports will not appear here. You will still use the grant report form found on our website and submit it via email. If you're unsure if you have a report due on a past grant, you can contact my colleague Wendy Cahill for more information. Her information is at the bottom of this slide. And finally, here we're looking at your information under the Application History tab, the third tab in the Application and Grants section of the dashboard. Once you complete a grant report and it is approved, information about that grant moves to the list on this tab. It becomes part of your history. And here is where you'll find information on your grants from our old GrantSource. They should all be listed here, but please note that right now we're still loading and working with that data. So if you look at it and something is not there, don't worry. This section is still under development and will eventually all be there. So that's the new GrantSource. We believe it really offers an easier and even more streamlined online platform for you. I know that many of you know her already, but if you ever need assistance with GrantSource, contact my colleague Wendy Cahill for help. Now let's turn our attention to the nonprofit loan program. The foundation made its first loan in 1971 to historic Harrisville to help preserve the town's old industrial buildings as part of a pool of capital dedicated to below market rate loans to a nonprofit. We've continued to make loans, and since 1997, we've made loans totaling $1.6 million. This year, we have revised the program a bit and launched a new standardized application process to promote and streamline access to this important tool we have to help nonprofits meet loan capital needs. Debt financing is just another tool for nonprofits to use, mostly in cases where you have an identified revenue source in the future and you need a financial bridge to get you to that source. Our nonprofit loan program can provide financing when a nonprofit can't get it from another source, like a local bank or credit union or another financial institution like the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund or the Community Development Finance Authority. It is not our intention to replace those sources of financial capital, and they are your best place to go first to inquire about debt financing. You should develop a relationship with your local financial institutions. If you have done that and are still struggling to get the financing you need, we'd be happy to talk to you about our program. The kinds of things that are a good fit for a loan are things like bridge financing for land acquisition, renovations to your facilities or other capital improvements, or programmatic needs like starting or expanding a program that will generate some form of secure future revenue. However, debt financing is not for everyone, and it cannot be used to replace other regular revenue sources, or to fill budget gaps, or to fund a budget deficit. If this is a tool that your organization might be able to use, I'd suggest the following. First, go to our website and review the guidelines. You can find them under the Apply for a Grant section. Please do talk to your local bank or credit union first. If you are interested in applying or learning more, please contact Kevin Peterson, one of our senior program officers who serves as the Charitable Foundation's loan officer. Kevin will discuss your situation with you and determine if you are positioned to submit an application, and we'll work with you from there. So the last thing we wanted to do was to share with you some changes and enhancements we're making to the Community Grants Program in 2018. The Community Grants Program is the Charitable Foundation's most open and broad grant program, open to all 501c3s working in the state across all issue areas, whether that be health and well-being, arts and culture, education, environment, economic development. Today we want to share with you the highlights and sort of the broad outline of these changes. We do plan to offer another workshop in spring 2018 that will review these enhancements and this new information in more detail and provide you with further guidance about the program and the application process. So like many of your organizations, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation has a strategic plan that guides our work. Motivating these changes to the Community Grants Program is one of the objectives in our strategic plan that you see here on this slide, that nonprofits in New Hampshire are stronger and have greater impact because of foundation grants. When we set that as one of our objectives, we asked ourselves, is our Community Grants Program set up to reach this goal? And so we've spent the past 18 months or so taking a good look at the Community Grants Program to determine if it was set up to meet this objective. Some of the things we did during this period of strategic analysis included conducting a review of grant-making best practices and a review of the current grant-making literature. We consulted with our peers at other foundations and experts and thought leaders in the field of philanthropy around the country. We also conducted a survey of New Hampshire nonprofits about the kinds of grants that make the most difference for them. You may have received the survey last summer, and in fact, we received back about 500 responses to that survey. So if you were one of those respondents, we thank you. And after the survey, we held a focus group in order to dig a little deeper on some of what we learned in the survey. All of this inquiry and feedback from you pointed to what we actually knew to be true, that unrestricted multi-year support is the single best vehicle to strengthen nonprofits. Now, we've made unrestricted and multi-year grants for some time, and in response to feedback from you, we have worked to increase that support over time. But the fact is, the majority of our grants in the Community Grants Program are project grants and for just 1 year. We knew that we could do more, and we wanted to change this. So in response to what we've heard from you and our research and learning from the field, in 2018, we will begin making all unrestricted grants for our larger grants through the Community Grants Program, and we will increase the number of multi-year awards that we make. We are super excited about this change that's really designed to give nonprofits the flexibility and support they need to meet their mission. At the same time, we will continue to offer access to small project support through our Express Grant program. So let's look exactly at how the program will be set up, and this slide reviews those details. The Foundation is very committed to supporting nonprofits at all different levels of organizational development to build their capacity and infrastructure. We heard loud and clear that some of the current guidelines we have for our unrestricted operating grants have been a barrier to many organizations to apply for this kind of funding. particularly our requirement that applicants have a completed board-approved strategic plan and either an independent audit or independent financial review. We want to make this program as open as possible for smaller or newer organizations that are often doing critical or unique work in their communities but who can't meet those requirements. However, we still need to ensure effective use of charitable resources, and we also want to encourage nonprofit best practices around governance and financial management. As a matter of fact, we recognize our application criteria have been incentive for many staff and board leaders to adopt certain best practices. So to try to meet both those objectives, we've established a set of guidelines that we believe speaks to organizations of differing sizes or at different stages of development. The way this works is that there are two different grant award levels, and how much an organization can apply for depends on the types of documentation related to governance and financial management that can be submitted with the application. So with these new guidelines, organizations that do not have an audit or financial review are now eligible to apply for unrestricted support. They may submit their 990 or 990EZ or their NHCT 2A that is submitted to the Department of Charitable Trusts. And these organizations may request $30,000 for a multi-year grant or $10,000 a year for 3 years. Organizations that do not have a board-approved strategic plan in place at the time of application are now eligible to apply for unrestricted support. These organizations who receive a multi-year grant must certify willingness to complete a strategic plan within the first year of the grant and will be eligible to apply for $30,000 over 3 years, which again is $10,000 a year for those 3 years. Much like our old guidelines, organizations that can submit an audit or financial review and that have a board-approved strategic plan can request $60,000 for a 3-year multi-year grant or $20,000 a year for each of those 3 years. And in both categories, organizations must be able to certify that 100% of their board members make financial gifts to the organization. I'd like to focus for a minute on the multi-year component of these grants. Again, we know from talking to thought leaders in our field, peers around the country, and most importantly, talking to nonprofit leaders in New Hampshire, that support that is not only unrestricted but more continuous in nature is key to building nonprofit strength and capacity. We've made multi-year grants through the Community Grants Program, but admittedly, we've made few. With these program changes, we are committed to increasing significantly the number of multi-year grants made through the Community Grants Program. But it's important to understand that this will have, particularly in the first years of this new approach, an impact on the number of awards we can make. Let me explain why. Due to the way that the IRS regulates foundations, when we make a multi-year grant, we must encumber or set aside the cash for that grant at the time that we make the grant, even though we are paying it out over multiple years. So in any one year, if we are making more multi-year grants, we will make fewer but larger grants with those available dollars. Remember, those are multi-year commitments. This graphic here attempts to illustrate the ramping up that we expect over time. Each of the blocks here represents the number of grants awarded in 1 year. So in year 1, we'll make a certain number of grants. The next year, we'll pay out the second year grant to those awarded in the previous year, and we'll make a new set of multi-year grants to different nonprofits. And so it goes over time, and we expect that by year 3, we will be in a funder-grantee relationship with about the same number of grantees as we are now. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone understood this. We want to be open and transparent with those of you who will be applying to this program. There's no question that the first year we will make fewer grants than we typically make. But I want to make it clear that that is in number of grants, not dollars. We will still be granting out our available dollars through those grants. So let's talk about what we're going to look for in our grant application for these unrestricted grants. As I said, our goal is really contributing to nonprofit strength and impact, and so we've revised our unrestricted grant application to try and get at this. The application will ask you to describe both where your nonprofit is in its organizational development now and your vision for where you're going. It will include questions that will highlight the goals and strategies that will be your focus over the grant period and areas within your organization that you feel need strengthening in order to carry out and achieve those goals. Some of the things that we'll be looking for are represented here on this slide. And keep in mind, you don't really have to worry about writing all of this down now or completely understanding the details of this, because we do plan to offer a workshop again in the spring of 2018, and we'll review this new application and provide you with some deeper guidance and the opportunity to ask specific questions about the application. But just to give you a preview, we'll be looking at these 4 things. Programs. Does the organization operate quality programs that improve the community? Strategies. Has the organization developed specific and realistic short and long-term strategies for addressing identified organizational needs? Impact. Does the organization demonstrate how an unrestricted grant could have a measurable impact on organizational and programmatic capacity and effectiveness? And capacity. Does the organization have the capacity to manage this grant? When you submit this application, you will be submitting an application for 3-year multi-year support. We are committed to increasing the number of multi-year awards we make, but based on the strength of the application and available resources, some awards may be for 1 or 2 years within the grant committee and board discretion. The application and review process will be essentially the same as the process we currently use. Your first step will be the submission of a concept paper, which is really just a short summary, or pitch, if you will, about your work. Staff will review the submitted concept papers and invite the most competitive, that is, those most likely to have a strong chance of getting funded, to submit a full application. Those applications will then be reviewed by one of our 9 grant review committees, both regional and statewide. Those committees will make their funding recommendations to the board that they work with, who will make the final funding decisions. One of the things we're really excited about is that we've also strengthened our own process of looking at the impact of our grant making. There'll be 2 components. So we will continue to ask for annual grant reports on achievement towards your named priorities, similar to what you're accustomed to submitting now. We will be very interested, as always, on the content of your grant report. We do read them, and we have been working to improve our own feedback to you about your work. It's extremely helpful to us to understand how you have used our grant support, and we often share the information in the reports with donors who may have helped support your work. The second component of the evaluation is the completion of a modified version of an organizational assessment tool at the beginning of your grant period and then again at the end of the multi-year grant. Now, this is not going to be a long, burdensome tool. We expect that it should be no more than 30 to 40 minutes of board and lead staff time to complete this assessment tool. This organizational assessment will help us look at any changes in capacity over time. It's important that you understand that we've developed the use of this organizational assessment tool as a way to look at the impact of this program as a whole, not as a way to assess the success of any one grant to any one organization. Finally, we'll still offer the opportunity for nonprofits to submit small project requests, and we'll continue to do that through our Express Grants program. The Express Grants are small grants of up to $5,000 for discrete project activities. It's important to note, however, that a nonprofit can receive either one Express Grant or one unrestricted grant from the Community Grants program in one calendar year. And these are the deadlines for the Community Grants program for 2018. All of our applications are accepted through GrantSource, the online tool that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So the Express Grant program will take place over the winter and spring with a deadline to submit the applications by March 30th. And then you'll receive funding notification or notification of a decision by May 11th at the latest. The unrestricted grant process will begin over the summer with concept papers due August 2nd. Applicants who are invited to submit a full application will learn about that by August 31st, and the application will be due on September 28th. The applications then go through the internal review process with final decisions in mid to late December. Of course, all of this information is posted on our website, so you can refer to that there. If you have any questions about our grants program, a good person to start with is my colleague, Wendy Cahill, and her contact information is here. Of course, any staff member would be happy to assist you and refer you to the correct person if they are unable to answer your question. So that's it. Thank you so much for all you do for New Hampshire and New Hampshire residents, and thanks again for joining us today.